Welcome to our fourth week together in using data to transform health systems and health practice. And as we dive into our time together this week, I'm particularly excited because as I've had an opportunity to talk with several of the working groups this week, I think that our topics seem to be strategically fit to where many groups are in terms of their data analysis. So we've spent a little bit of time talking about designing our analytic strategy and finding variables that help us to answer the primary question that we're looking at. But as we've seen in some of your group work, there are times when the variables within the data set have limitations, and they aren't able to fully answer the practice questions that you've designed. And so we're going to spend a little bit of time talking about how we redefine variables using SPSS. And as we look at that, the first topic I'd like to cover is using the way that SPSS codes the variables and determining if its estimation of that variable level of measurement is in fact correct. So we're going to take a look at several key variables in regards to the practice questions we're looking at, both background variables like zip code and hospital name, as well as the specific clinical variables like whether or not discharge instructions are given and what the excess readmission ratio is for that disease process. So we're going to look at how SPSS thinks these variables should be coded, and we're going to apply our own thinking skills, applying the levels of measurement to decide if SPSS is on the right track or if we need to coach it and help it a bit. So what I'd like to do now is turn to our SPSS interface and begin to look at these two background variables. So the first variable we have here highlighted is zip code. We know that, of course, zip code is a number. 30650, 30329, 30002 are numbers. But what does that number mean? And so I'll refer you back to a link that I've posted on our course website if it's helpful to review levels of measurement. So by following this first link in week 4, you can get another author's explanation of the levels of measurement, and this would complement the discussion we've had on Semester Saturday as well as the discussion in the Salkin text, if it would be helpful to brush up on what nominal, ordinal, interval, and ratio mean, because that understanding is crucial for the thinking that we're going to now do about levels of measurement in SPSS. So if it's helpful to review those data, take a look at this web link or the Salkin text and refresh your memory about those levels of measurement before you hear the next part of our discussion where we apply those levels of measurement in SPSS. So here we are back at zip code again. Now we know that it's numeric, as we've already said, but what is zip code? It's a number that's used to represent a region of the United States. So even though it's a number, it's actually a nominal variable. It's a name. It's a number that names a particular place. Now, SPSS has treated this as scale, as you can see, because it's a number. But in fact, zip code is just a designation for an area. So if we want to help SPSS better understand zip code, you can click here on type on the ellipse, and you could convert this to a string variable. And when you do that, SPSS is now going to treat the zip code as a category. You can see it's converted it to nominal, which is, in fact, zip code should be. So that will help you as you run some of your descriptive statistics or graphs. SPSS will now more accurately interpret this number since you've told it what it is. So now let's take a look at hospital name. Variable 2. SPSS has identified hospital name as a string variable. And if you see here on the far right side, it is assigned that a nominal level of measurement. So it's a name. The name of the hospital is text and is a name. So SPSS has correctly interpreted this variable for us. So let's look at some of our clinical variables now. So here we have discharge instructions given, variable 9. Let's run some descriptive statistics on this to see if it can help us understand this number so we can decide what level of measurement it is. So we'll begin by going up to Graph and Chart Builder, which we've used throughout the course, and let's plot a histogram. So we'll go to the gallery and select histogram. We'll pick the first default one on the far left side. We'll scroll down to our variable. Discharge instructions given, and let's see what that graph shows us. So here we have discharge instruction given. It ranges from 0 on the far left to 100 on the far right. So this is a proportion, it's a percentage. How at this hospital, how many patients have received discharge instructions for their disorder. So as a percentage, now that we understand what this variable is, let's go back and look at how SPSS has interpreted it. So discharge instructions, it's calling it numeric, which we agree with. It's a percentage. But if you scroll over here, you see it's treating it as nominal. So would you agree that it's nominal? And if not, what level of measurement would you assign to it? So after you decide, come back and let's work on it together. Now in SPSS, we only have 3 categories. Nominal, so a name, ordinal, where we have rankings, and then scale. So scale includes interval and ratio numbers. So in this instance, since we're looking at a percentage that ranges from 0 to 100, that would be scale. So if we tab, now we see that this variable has been correctly treated as scale. So now let's look at another clinical variable, variable 36. So the excess readmission ratio for pneumonia. I want you to think about what level of measurement you would give that number. Come back and let's discuss it. All right, so the excess readmission ratio for pneumonia is a ratio. It has a numerator, which is the expected number of readmissions, and a denominator, or rather the numerator is the actual number of readmissions, and the denominator is the anticipated number of readmissions for that facility. So this is a ratio number. It has an absolute 0, and that is what defines it as a ratio. So if we see here, it's called numeric, so it's a number. Yes, we agree. And it's a ratio level of measurement, which SPSS puts interval and ratio together and calls it scale. So we would agree with this assessment. So for our final clinical variable, we're looking at the total number of readmissions for pneumonia. So think about that. The total number of patients who are readmitted for pneumonia. What level of measurement would you assign to that variable? So the number of readmissions, again, has an absolute 0. There could be 0 readmissions. And the difference between 0 and 1 and 1 and 2, each increment change is equivalent. So this, again, is a ratio scale. So a ratio is a number, which SPSS has correctly identified. And in SPSS terminology, that is also a scale variable. Scale, again, being interval and ratio in SPSS. So now what I'd like you to do is I would like you to go through your own data set and look at the key variables for your analysis and apply the same logic to critique SPSS's identification of their level of measurement, seeing if it's correct or not, and then coaching SPSS using your statistical knowledge. So I'll welcome you back to our part 2 of looking at variable recoding in a moment. Hope you have a wonderful week working with data, working with variables, and creating this data set to be increasingly flexible and responsive to the questions and the needs that you have for it. Have a great day.